the Diary of a CTO podcast, sharing the secrets of successful CTOs. Brought to you by TrueNorth, the home of technology recruitment. Hosted by Guy Bevington.
So welcome back to the Diary of a CTO, where I'm joined by this week's guest, Dedy Kredo, founder and chief product officer for Qodo. Dedy, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Guy. How are you?
I'm very, very well, very well. It's a lovely sunny day in London, which I don't get to say very often, but I'm taking it and full of the joys of summer. So yeah, really good
Nice.
to see you.
Nice.
So Dedy, you're very much welcome here today, and I guess to give a very brief intro to you before I let you, you talk a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing. Qodo, really interesting business. It's an AI platform which empowers developers to deliver the highest quality software, and which sounds like a really great product. So really keen to hear a little bit more about your work you're doing there and your approach today. But before we talk about Qodo, your background, you've obviously held a number of product, data, tech leadership positions, both in smaller startup companies and also huge organizations such as VMware. So clearly a wealth of experience to bring to the table today. But let's start at the beginning, if we may. And yeah, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your background, what got you into tech in the first place, and talk us through your career journey today.
Sure. So yeah, my background is quite diverse. I think like I started coding probably when I was 12, like on a 386 like a computer back in the day. So like I've always been kind of very interested in like programming, generally in technology. I'm very curious about tech, about AI generally. And then I'd say that during my career, I kind of moved back and forth from like tech positions to more customer facing positions and product positions. I knew very early on that eventually I would want to start my own company. And that's something that kind of burning inside me from, I would say, from a very, very early days. I relocated to the US with a startup that was back in 2009, and I was doing more of customer facing roles back then. So I led the sales engineering team. I started as a sales engineer, then led sales engineering teams, solution engineering teams. And then when we got acquired by VMware, I switched to a product position. I basically kind of managed the product line within VMware. And as like kind of an aspiring entrepreneur at the time, product seemed to me like the best role for learning how to study the market, how to launch new capabilities, how to understand what the competition does. And that kind of led me to the product role. And then like during, I would say, kind of the mid 2010s, data science became a big thing. Deep learning kind of started really picking up, and that really piqued my interest. So I started really learning data science. I started moving back kind of into programming, so back into more doing Python. I led a data science team at a company called Explorium that we were building an external data platform that helped essentially help teams, data science teams, combine external data with their internal data to kind of maximize the signal. And the system allowed to train models, and that kind of really got me into data science and kind of the like early into deep learning as well. Yeah, after that role, I knew that like I was really looking at like how do I start something in like, and like basically trying to find knowing that AI is going to be huge. I started thinking through like what is going to be like the biggest impact areas of AI. And it was very for me it started becoming more and more obvious in like 2021 to in early 2022 that software engineering is going to be revamped. And basically what I saw is that yeah, Copilot kind of started producing like code completion, and that was starting to pick up. But thinking about like how LLMs are going to get smarter and smarter, and basically how companies would need to change their processes in order to really adopt LLMs at scale, um, and really thinking about how are they going to make sure that code remains of high quality, well tested. um, Became like, for me, it became like kind of a no-brainer of like where this like is going to be, or like where the challenges are going to be with embracing Gen AI for software development. um and that's kind of that led to the start of Qodo. And initially we focused on testing, and then we expanded, but I can elaborate more on Qodo probably later on.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah. Cool, perfect. Well, thank you for that, and yeah, great to hear a little bit more insight into your journey. And yeah, I mean, Qodo, I'd love to hear a little bit more about it and your approach, because it kind of feels like a very relevant problem that pretty much every company that's building software at the moment in the world that we're living in is going to be thinking about touching AI in some way, shape, and form, and how do you kind of keep that quality, where it needs to be. So I can certainly see the gap in the market for it. But let's talk a little bit more about your journey. It feels like you've got a very well-rounded experience. You've obviously touched on different areas from data science to machine learning, but it also feels like you've got a real kind of healthy respect and appreciation for the product world as well. And I guess we're sort of seeing that marriage in the world of technology between product and tech kind of becoming, a lot more harmonious and a lot more important in a lot of the companies that we work with. Absolutely. So how do you feel that knowledge of the product space has helped you become a more effective technology leader?
Yeah, I think that like we're actually at the point in time where it's like it's the really good days for very technical product people.
Mm,
The ability nowadays to, because um, code generation is becoming really, really good, at least at producing very initial prototypes. And we're seeing like um, companies in this space that help you kind of build a prototype fast. Like the most well known is Bolt. There's a few of them. And the ability to, like, someone that is on one hand has a business like connotation, or understands the market and understands product, but also has like is technical enough to work with these tools, and has some coding knowledge, can really start getting superpowers
mm,
with these kind of tools. And especially in the areas, what I'm seeing nowadays is like my product managers that are all like our product managers that are all very technical. They can iterate and ideate on prototypes really, really fast.
mm,
This is like a very actually recent development, right, of the last few months, like where it got into this level. And things that in the past would take a lot longer to ideate, to iterate, can be a lot faster. So I think like being very curious, like being like going into the details, um, learning how to code, and learning like the technicalities of coding, um, but also knowing that the models are becoming so good nowadays that you can iterate with them very fast, at least on prototypes, but probably not on uh, like production code. That kind of like I can talk about it more in detail in terms of like what I think about production code as it relates to AI. But yeah, I think this is an amazing time to actually be a technical product manager.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think, you made a really good point there about the right sort of mindset. Those people that are curious, and the speed of which now, like I said, and it is genuinely within the last few months, it's become a kind of viable possibility. But the speed of which you can productize a concept now, and obviously, like I say, even if it's at a prototype stage, just get something that's sort of operational and working is so exciting, isn't it? And so the possibilities are endless, really, in terms of where you can go with it. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that front. And as you've evolved throughout your career, talk to us a little bit about what do you feel are some of the most valuable qualities that you've aimed to aspire to as far as a technology leader goes? What do you feel are some of the most valuable attributes of a tech leader?
Yeah, I think like yeah, it's a great question. There are a few for sure. Like one thing that we already started talking about is curiosity. Like I think people that are curious, that like research, that want to stay up to date, um, in especially in AI nowadays, things are moving so fast, and it's like we're on this exponential curve that really I don't think I have seen in my career. Like, and I think many people agree on that. It's amazing to see that. I think we really, maybe excuse me, maybe every generation says that, but like it does seem we are in a very, very special time in history.
Yeah.
Um, and being curious and being kind of willing, like to adapt and change. That's, I guess, a second thing. Um, like you really need to, this is true for technology leaders, for anyone that's doing a startup like these days, you got to be moving really, really fast. Like the typical cycles of like ideating and prototyping and um you know like working on a new capability is like um it's becoming very, very hard in this world to work on something that maybe in a couple of months or 3 months is not even going to be relevant anymore
Mm.
because maybe the competition would like do, or something else comes up that like makes it obsolete. um so you got to be like in a mindset of constant adaptation, constant learning, um be very humble. I think like and I think that's like knowing that there's so many unknowns, so many things that you don't know, and it's almost like to operate in this kind of environment with a lot of uncertainty. I think not a lot of people like I guess it's hard to find people that have these traits that can adapt quickly, that like operate well in this uncertainty. It's very hard for people like and I see that also for like for people that work at Qodo. Like it's you gotta be like the best, like the folks that thrive at Qodo are folks that can handle this uncertainty, that move really fast, that like to ideate and iterate, and it excites them. So it's not, yeah, it's kind of like not to the like being a technology leader these days is not to the faint of heart, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point you make, and it's almost goes back to that. It feels sort of inherently uncomfortable for people, I think, to operate in a space of uncertainty all the time. But you're right, the speed of which it's evolving, it's impossible to be certain, because we saw a breakthrough in one model a year ago, and then all of a sudden another model comes along and it totally usurps that one, and it's kind of you just got to, like I say, be really fluid and dynamic in your processes. And I think it's similar to the mindset of how a lot of successful companies, I think, how they frame failure. Failure is that big F word that a lot of people don't like to say or think about, but embracing it in the right way. And it's
Yeah.
rather than thinking this is a failure and that's a finite outcome, it's thinking about it from a how can we speed up that feedback loop, how can we expedite that process to understand what is working, what isn't working. And I think that's the really exciting place of, to your point about how quickly you can create a prototype and iterate on it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Actually, like this is a great point you're making about failing fast, right? Like it's um you gotta be like it's interesting. Like on one hand, you need to be able to iterate fast, adapt fast, like fail fast. You'll inevitably fail, right? Like it's like I think generally in life, like it's something that like people try to over optimize for succeeding, like in everything, and it's almost like being able to fail fast and overall succeeding more than failing for sure.
Mhm.
But like but being able to accept failure, learn and adapt. I think this is very like critical. But I'd say one more thing that maybe I would kind of contradict myself a little bit, but on one hand, you got to move fast, and you got to iterate and you got to evolve all the time. um, based on the changing market conditions. But on the other hand, I also appreciate people that do have this grit and resiliency and like kind of like can stick like have an opinion
Hmm.
and stick with that opinion. Like obviously, once it if it like the opinion is not completely invalid anymore, it's a different thing. But as long as it's not been like an devalid, I don't know if devalidate is a word, but invalidated, um, be able to like there's not a lot of people that in a world where there's so much noise can kind of have an idea or have or believe in something and stick with it for like a given time period. And if you're right, and if you're right, and if not a lot of people have that insight that you have, then you can make a very big impact.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. It's the balancing act, isn't it, between being inquisitive and curious and dynamic in your mindset, but also having confidence in your own volition and resilience, like I say, to kind of put up with those failures along the way. And actually, just hearing you speak there, I was thinking this. It's quite an interesting sort of metaphor within that, really, in that terms of mindset, when you, especially for like the product that Qodo does, when you're thinking about the quality of code, but it almost sort of brought through to me the concept of TDD, and obviously writing the test first and then writing just enough, it fails, obviously red, green, refactor until you write just enough and then it passes the test. And I guess that's a similar kind of mindset to really what you need, isn't it, when you're kind of iterating with the new product is, let's just get it to the point where it works. And I suppose it's probably quite a nice segue to talk a bit about Qodo and that quality piece, because I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition between iterating quickly and especially relevant, as I say, in this world that we're living in now, but obviously creating a tool which allows you to iterate whilst maintaining the quality at the same time, obviously is absolutely paramount, to success. So yeah, talk us through about Qodo. Let's sort of go into a bit more detail about the business and your approach and kind of how you guys go about things.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, like you said it really well, I have to say. So like kudos on that. I think there's a lot of a lot of hype and a lot of excitement that is also like totally like it makes sense that there's so much excitement about like code generation, about this ability of these models to write code that actually works and that can produce really amazing like outcomes or outputs. Um, and there's a lot of hype, I would say, around vibe coding, right? Like you're using some coding assistant and you're telling it what to do and it's doing it and you're moving really fast and you don't even pay attention to the code that it's outputting. And I think what we are realizing and what we've been saying for a while now at Qodo is that for complex enterprise code, like you gotta have kind of these both sides of the house. You gotta have the like we call it kind of inside of Qodo, we have the blue team and the red team. Like the blue team is like in charge of code generation. And we have a side of the product that is focused on code generation. We have plugins to various IDEs. We help developers to generate code that is aligned with the best practices of the organization. We also have specific UX around generating tests because we think that tests are becoming more important as more and more of the code gets generated by AI. You want to make sure that it's very well tested, very well covered, and that you can kind of express all the behaviors of your code as tests. Um, and because if every developer is becoming 10x more productive, then you got to make sure that you're also reviewing the code, testing your code, and that you're not overlooking things, and you're not introducing either bugs or issues into production code. And this is especially like if you're maybe a small startup and you're ideating, like your focus is definitely on moving fast and breaking things, right? Like that's kind of the focus of a startup. But if you're like a mid-sized organization or an enterprise where the cost of like bad code like is significant, right? It slows you down over like eventually if it's not maintainable. It can produce issues, bugs that even like I think as AI becomes really, really good at writing code, there's always edge cases that come from this like constant tension between requirements and then the actual output, which as you like build stuff, you realize things that you didn't really plan. And
Mm,
this is true for any process of like building products.
mm,
So there's always going to be these edge cases that eventually also lead to bugs and issues.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's true no matter how good AI is going to become.
Yeah.
So you need to have a process that allows you to on one hand be very efficient, productive, and leverage these amazing advancements to go really fast. But you got to also yeah, really improve your ability to test code, to check code, to review code, to verify that it works, that it's aligned with the requirements.
Yeah.
And this is what we call the kind of the red, like our red team. This is and for us, like today we have two main products. We have Qodo Gen, which is on the code generation side. Again, it also helps you to generate code that is aligned with best practices and tests and things like that. But it also it is a code generation solution, right? Um, and today it's a plugin for IDEs, but soon it's also going to be available outside the IDE. So you'll be able to trigger um, a coding task to run even in the background. But I can mention, I can talk about that a bit in a second. But then we have our what we call kind of the red side of the house, which is our it's manifested in our code review product, which is called Qodo Merge. It's a plugin to Git providers, so it will plug into like a GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab, and then it learns when you first install it. It learns the best practices of the organization. It kind of scans the history of on a per repo basis, and it learns what are the patterns, what are the typical bugs, what are comments that the senior developers typically make to junior developers in that specific code, in that specific team, for this specific company, organization, code base. So it kind of learns your patterns. And then when new code gets introduced as a pull request, it reviews it automatically and it highlights the potential issues where there are potential bugs, or maybe there's code that's not aligned with the typical best practices of the organization. And obviously, everything is kind of configurable, customizable. So that's kind of a second like side of Qodo. And then the third component is our code understanding capabilities. So this is kind of what we call the gray team. So like we have like a very kind of robust capability to index many even thousands of repos in some cases, and create kind of detailed knowledge bases around them, so that both the code generation side, or both our code generation plugin and our code review plugins, can leverage that knowledge to kind of pull from in order to produce higher quality code or to catch issues when reviewing code. So that's like at a very high level, very enterprise focus. We have like large Fortune 500 customers that are leveraging us. We're 2.5 years, a little, well, 2 years and 9 months actually, old now.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you. That's really, really interesting. And yeah, I mean, it feels like you have really conceived a very holistic approach to the product with those sort of three different strands. And yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, I love it when obviously in the world that I operate in technology recruitment, I have conversations day in day out with companies which are using AI in different ways, and I love it when you kind of hear of a use case where it's just so, I don't want to take anything away from you here by saying obvious, but so obvious the value that would bring, and it's just kind of, and I really like the fact in this sort of situation as well, it's sort of using AI in a way to monitor the quality of AI in the code as well. So I think it's a really cool use case for a product, and I really like the point that you made earlier on, and I can massively see the the sort of gap in the market at that sort of mid to enterprise scale. Because what's the cost of writing bad code, right? Obviously, you want to move quickly and you want to adapt and embrace these things, but companies of a certain size, that risk appetite has to be in parallel with that. And yeah, I can see how a product like that would give a lot of companies a lot of assurances, and enable them ultimately to streamline their processes and move quicker, but in a safer and more coherent way. So yeah, I mean, it seems like a fantastic platform, and yeah, kudos to you guys that you've obviously achieved what you've achieved within only a couple of years. So very, very excited to see where it goes from here.
Thank you.
So talk to us a bit about, I suppose we're in this world now where AI is evolving at pace, and it's very difficult for anybody, I think, to really predict what's going to happen. But keen to hear from your perspective, specifically how you feel AI will impact the workplace, but also continue to transform the world of software development. What's your thoughts on that, if you kind of had to predict where things are going and how things are going to continue to shape up?
Yeah, I think there is a sentence that says that people tend to kind of overestimate the impact of technology in the near term, but also underestimate the long term impact. And I think it's true in this case. I think yeah, I think definitely near term, I don't see, like, for example, the role of developers it is evolving. But especially in enterprises, complex code, like, I think developers, um, they're not going anywhere. They're becoming a lot more productive. That's for sure. Um, I think that it's like you said, it's very, very hard to predict like what's gonna happen, where things are going. It is like I think it is like what we're living through now is like it is industrial revolution kind of thing, like maybe even bigger. I don't know, like for knowledge workers, for many different types of work that uh, us humans do today. And I do think that it will change a lot. Um, I think in the short to mid term, like the big winners will be those that will know how to adopt into this world and become like the super version of themselves, really, like the best version of themselves in this kind of world. Like it's almost like I feel like maybe I remember a couple of years ago there were some developers that were saying like, hey, like I don't like all these like tools that like do code completion or things like that. I'd rather like do um and I think nowadays it's becoming very obvious that if a developer that doesn't adopt these tools, like, will just stay behind. They're just not going to be able to do as fast and even as robust code, I think. Um, Generally, teams that don't adopt these tools are going to stay behind. And we live in at least in the western side of the world, like we are in a capitalist society, and you have to survive, you have to keep up with the levels of productivity of other teams, and you have to adopt these tools. um, and developers that learn how to use these tools but also do it in a responsible way, and not just take every code, like just like code that AI wrote, and just like push it to production without verifying, without understanding what it actually does. um, and like having the right processes in place to check and verify and compare to the requirements, and upper your game in the testing side. um, Whereas, like, I think testing generally was something that developers don't really like to do, but I think nowadays it's very clear that it's super important to be able to test your code. And also, the coding agents are not as effective if they can't run tests and actually verify that the code works. So, I think again, in the short, medium term, like, people have to really adopt and um to be able to stay competitive and leverage these tools.
Yeah.
Then I think that maybe longer term, the role is of developers. Like if I stick for a minute into the area of like software development, and then we can maybe broaden it. Um, I think that software developers' role, like their typical day to day, their activities will change a lot. So I think in 5 years from now, for example, I think a developer most of the day like reviews code, um, checks that it's aligned with their requirements, makes tweaks here and there, um, and launches maybe one developer will have like four different tasks that they launch agents to work on in parallel. Like they wake up in the morning and they see that there was a production error and an agent ran in the background and analyzed it and produced an output and maybe already opened a PR with a potential fix, and they review it and they maybe make a tweak here or there and they approve. And then in parallel they're working on a very complex rewrite where they're working more closely, I would say, with the agent, like directing it, and then maybe there's another background task for some failed test that the agent is providing an analysis and the developer is reviewing. And so I think there's a lot of review in the developer, like a lot of the time is spent on actually reviewing code.
Yeah.
A lot less handwriting code. Um, and who knows, maybe like I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and maybe they will tell me like, in 20 years from now, they will look at me and say like, Dad, you actually wrote code by hand. You actually wrote like,
Yeah.
4i, it's gonna be something like like machine code that is like nowadays not like very few people do. But uh so yeah, maybe it will get into areas like that. um and yeah, and I'm more on the AI like optimist side, I would say, when you have to kind of like and I'm generally like more optimistic. Too, there's advantages and disadvantages in that, obviously. um but I think that AI can have a really, really amazing impact on society. I do believe that there are risks that have to be really, um, really well thought through. Um, but I do think that the opportunity for a very positive impact is bigger.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think that it's very, like you said, it's very, very hard to know how things are going to look like 30, maybe 10, 20, definitely 30 years from now. But
Mm.
I want to believe that we'll be in a place where there is a lot like that people have. That's maybe just like me kind of romanticizing it, but like that, I want to think of like imagine a world where people have a lot more time and a lot more tasks are being automated, and somehow we figured out the economics around it.
Yeah.
Um, so that overall, like the like humanity is at a better place. And I do believe that if you look historically, every time there was a big technological breakthrough, like overall, like people's well-being, like people like lifestyle, like improved. um Obviously not equally everywhere, and like there's all the caveats to it, but I do believe this is another case that can take us into a place where eventually, like as a society, we are better off. um but we do have to something that I still like kind of struggle in my mind is like how we figure out the economics around it. If that we will see a place where jobs get automated eventually, and then like how is that gonna work? How do we move into a place where if you need less work, or less human work? um how do you make sure that you kind of distribute the all the all the value that is being created, not in a very concentrated manner? That worries me. um and I don't have like solutions off the top of my mind, but I think like these are things we're really going to need to think through um as AI gets more and more like powerful and is able to do a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you made so many great points in there, but I really like the point that you made at the beginning. I think that people that will succeed in the short term are people that see AI not as the solution, but just as as another tool, to kind of, like I say, this give them their superpower, and kind of turn them into more than what they are at the moment. And I think I also totally agree with you, just with the speed of which it has evolved literally over the last sort of couple of years, and it's only exponentially evolving at a more rapid rate. The ability for people to kind of start trusting in that, because I think at the moment there is an inherent level of sort of distrust around AI, and I think principally because people feel like there's that element of they're not necessarily being augmented yet, they're being replaced. And a lot of people, day to day outside of the tech world, are seeing their jobs probably threatened. But I think it goes back to, I always say to people that no matter how you feel about AI or technology, or no matter how much, you talk about those developers that were interested to boycott those tools for a while, it's not going anywhere. Yeah, we're not going backwards, right? So it's here to stay now, and it's only going to exponentially increase in terms of its evolution. So, I think it's going to give birth to a new type of skill set that has to be created. And the thing that you said earlier on, which I do still take quite a lot of solace in, that no matter how advanced or sophisticated AI, coding agents get, you're always going to have these kind of edge cases that present themselves in a dynamic context where, the requirements change, and you're always going to need some form of human input somewhere in that process. I equate it to, we get to the point where robotics have evolved to the point where, a robot can go and build a house, right? Great. You're still going to want a person to come around and just check the quality of that is where it needs to be before, somebody goes and lives in that house. But, I think that until we, which I don't see happening, fundamentally change our business model in the world of where humans provide services to other humans, that's how we get paid, that's how we create value. There's always going to be a need for humans to interact with that output, and then present that service, present that output to their customers in a way that is better, more efficient, more streamlined than other people. And that's why I think the whole customer service element of things is going to become truly important again, and actually what it is to be human, more, and how we interact with other people, because technology there is fundamentally there to service people, right? It's to solve problems for people. And that's why I'm quite reassured in the world of something like recruitment. There's so many tools that are out there that are massively increasing the productivity of recruiters, and a lot of recruiters out there worried about being replaced. But I still feel that the service that we provide and how we go about consulting with people, these are conversations that people want to have with other people. They're interested in finding jobs through various AI tools and job boards and so on and so forth, but fundamentally there'll always be that kind of backstop of, it needs to make sense in terms of having this conversation with a person, or getting that sort of consultancy. And I think that's where, hopefully, to your point about having two kids, 3 and 5, mine are 7 and 5, and I genuinely lie awake at night sometimes thinking, what kind of world are they going to inherit when it comes to the workplace by the time they're old enough to go into work? How are things going to look? How are they going to, what kind of skills are they going to need? And like I say, it's anyone's guess at the moment. It is a bit of a lottery, but the thing that I'm relatively reassured by is I do feel that it'll probably be more of those people skills, more of those human skills, more of that ability to connect with people, engage with people, the softer skills, which are going to become more important once we all have access to this layer of logic that is just a given. That actually, in many ways, it's going to enable us to become, like I say, more human, have more time on our hands, more efficiency, have a better quality of life than the previous generation, which is the way it's always progressively been. Like you said, with any kind of advancement in technology, as much as there's the level of distrust at the beginning, fundamentally it's a greater shift. And I think with this time, though, your point around security, obviously there's a lot more opportunity for things to go wrong a lot quicker, and obviously as such we need kind of further real kind of robust thought around ethics and contemplating the safeguards and the guardrails around AI as it does continue to evolve. And I totally agree with you there, but I do still feel like you do that there's more positives to be gained from it, if we embrace it in the right way than negatives.
Yeah, I think another like case to be made, interesting like way to think about it is that because of the ability to create software is gonna become a lot, or is becoming like let's say easier, or like it's faster to ideate, to create software, um, then there might be a boom of like software generally, of companies that are being created. um, because think about all the ideas. Like if you think about like yeah, there's all these software companies like that are being like that were created in the past like couple of decades, and the boom of like SaaS tools. But if you think about all the ideas of in people's minds that are not becoming software, like really what's becoming software is a fraction of the idea of like
Mm.
of those who are able to really think through it and raise funding and do this and that, and like so the barrier is like a lot lower to start working on something and create a prototype and do something.
Yeah.
So like I think there's going to be a like a boom of software, and generally there could be just a lot more. There is other questions, right, that are being raised on like defendability and how do you like build a like a viable business where it's so easy to create software. There's a lot of like questions there also. um but generally, if you think that if you believe that there's going to be so much more economic activity because of it, and I do think that this is a very plausible like near term like future, um then anytime something like this happens, there's just inherently just a lot more jobs that are being created because of that. And the question is, what's going to be faster, right? The pace of like AI being able to do like jobs and not need people, like let's say, or like the actual like so many more companies are being created, that you actually eventually you're positive, like you are like you need more people. Um, so I think like it's interesting. I don't have like an exact like prediction, but I feel like maybe it's going to be some sort of like a maybe an S shape kind of thing, or like where at first um you will see some decline in like certain positions that get like there's pressure from company leadership to automate and reduce workforce. But then you'll see a boom of new companies, so you'll see more hiring, um, and maybe then becomes more powerful, and then more gets automated. Like so, like I think it will be an interesting, like definitely exciting time, interesting time.
Mm.
Hard to predict exactly, but it is. Those are things that I'm also kind of thinking about. Like it's not super clear, um, because there's gonna be so much more economic activity now because it's so easy to create software. It's becoming easy to create software. It's also very interesting and challenging times to be a venture capitalist. Like, not
Yeah.
I'm not one, but like I'm thinking of it from their perspective. How do you think about defendability? How do you like? And there's so many more potentially companies that can just be bootstrapped and maybe don't need even like venture funding.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, absolutely.
like I've already seen a few. We have a few recent examples, like here in Israel. So it's like it's very interesting times for sure.
It is absolutely. But I think, yeah, the overarching comment that you made there, which I totally agree with and kind of take solace in, is more economic activity ultimately has to lead to more demand, more need for people in some way, shape, and form. However you splice it and dice it, it will be the case. So yeah, I think it's a great point. It'll probably be a shift in the focus of the need for those people and what they do, but it will still massively exist. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
very good point. Okay, great. Well, I'd like to sort of draw to a close just by asking a couple more questions about your journey as far as how you've grown as an individual throughout your career, and I suppose it's always good to talk a little bit about some of the challenges, you know, that we've talked quite a bit about some of the challenges that may present themselves moving forward, but it'd be great to understand a bit more about, as you've grown, you know, in your career, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced throughout your career, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I guess I'm living through the biggest challenge of my career, like
Yeah.
probably like building a company, like we're now approaching 70 people in the company, and I am manage like a significant portion of them, and it's like you need to kind of be able to, on one as a founder, I feel like on one hand you have to be able to give people like autonomy and let go and trust, and I really try to do that. But on the other hand, like I feel like you have to also stay in the details. There's this talk now about this founder mode where all the founders like are needs the successful founders have to be in the details in the so like I semi agree with that kind of notion. I feel like it's you on one hand you have to be in the details, but on the other hand, I think founder mode is like it's kind of problematic. It has the problematic side of like micromanaging people, and it kind of lead you down that path. So I'm trying to kind of find the that's I guess like one of my biggest challenges. I'm trying to find the right path there. I really care about the details. I want to be involved in them, and I feel like it's very important in a space that is moving so fast that we have alignment, that all the way up to the leadership and the founders, like we know what people are working on, we know the priorities, everybody's aligned on where we're going and how we differentiate in the market. Um, but it's this balance between like not like giving people the autonomy and letting them a lot of them are way smarter than me, so like letting them like do their thing and be very successful. um but on the other hand, I have a very like I have a unique point of view as a founder, and I see a lot, and I have the kind of the vision. Like I see kind of the customers, and I see the technology, and I see the competition, and like, so how do I bring that in, how do I affect the teams, like, or how do I pass that to the teams effectively,
Mm.
while not over kind of micromanaging kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the biggest challenges I see day in, day out of companies. Obviously, we work with businesses that are pre-seed, you know, sort of 10 people through to, you know, FTSE 100 and you know, big enterprise corporate clients, and those pain points that you see along the way of, you know, normally it is at that point, and it probably normally is actually around about that size that, you know, you guys are now, and where you're going at that next stage of your journey, that you have, you know, so many kind of very credible diligent founders that, you know, have built a great product, proven market fit, have a really good understanding of the detail and kind of what's got them to that point. And then it's how you successfully scale a business to that next phase. And it's still utilizing, I think, and playing on a lot of the strengths that have enabled you to get to that place, but it's also, like I say, more of that macro rather than looking at the micro piece, you know, to how do you then achieve that scale. And it's tough. It's really tough. You know, it's probably one of the biggest challenges I think that any leader can have. And, you know, I think all you can do is just sort of keep doing, like I say, keep doing what's right insofar as creating an environment that, how do I get the best out of the people that I've got? Because as long as you know you've got good people in the business, you know, it's how do you give them the support and the autonomy, but allow them to you know, like I say, do their best work. You know, very often a lot of the people you employ should be better at certain things, and so I know it's the case for me. A lot of people I employ better at certain things than me. You know, but how do you enable them to do that and kind of, you know, create their superpower whilst also monitoring and you know, keeping an eye on what they're doing. So yeah, it's a great point, and I think it's something that, you know, every company out there, every manager, you know, certainly if you're a founder of the business and you've got a real genuine, you know, vested interest in you know, how you feel about the company, and it's your baby, you obviously want to make it successful. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah. Another one, by the way, is like, how do you create another challenge that I feel that I have is how do I create alignment between different teams?
Mm,
Um, and it sounds like, yeah, you're just a startup, you're like not that big, and obviously it's much bigger problem with bigger organization, I guess. But we are trying. On one hand, we're like not a huge team, but we're doing a lot. Like we are competing on like different areas, and like we have, like as I mentioned, kind of these three main areas of the house of the company,
yeah,
of like the code generation side, the code review, the code review side, excuse me, and the code-based understanding side. And you gotta make sure that everybody's aligned on the mission, on the vision and the mission. Um, you have all these competing priorities, and obviously, like when you just start to monetize and you have your initial customers, you need to kind of balance the customer needs versus your vision and what you want to build next.
yeah,
Um, so creating alignment around this is a challenge, and I think it's a lot about like kind of to just doing it a lot, like constant alignment, repeating things a lot.
yeah,
Like um you tend to assume that the people like generally, I think as humans, like we tend to think that we explain something that people in front of us understand, but it's not obvious.
yeah,
It's not always the case.
yeah,
And what seems obvious to me, it might not be obvious to someone else.
yeah.
So it's like it's constantly like repeating like what we're doing, like working on the alignment. And then yeah, and then I would say maybe the last challenge is like we talked about a little bit that the space is moving, our space, AI for software engineering is moving so fast that it's like it things inevitably need to change. Like, so we are planning, like we have a quarterly plan, and we also have like a plan, like a yearly plan, and we have a vision for 2 years, for 2 3 years, 2 3 5 years. um but it happens quite often that we have a quarterly plan, we work on it, but then anything that is more than a quarter is not that easy to plan.
Mm,
And it's not, and on one hand, we're trying to be better at doing like longer horizon tasks, so we kind of have a dedicated section of the team that is working on longer term stuff, and then so we kind of split the team. We have people that are working on longer horizon tasks and people that are working on shorter horizon tasks. But in where we are is like in the kind of the space and the world we're living in is like um it's a lot more biased towards like um iterating fast and changing and having a roadmap, but being very, very open to changing it, um, and being okay with changing it. And it's you got to have the right mindset, and you got to have the right people and team that are in that mindset, that are okay with that, like
mm,
it, and are like feel like comfortable in a place where like things change a lot.
yeah,
So
yeah. So
so
so true. I think it's such a great point. Alignment is it's absolutely key, isn't it? And it becomes a bigger issue, like you say, when you do grow and you do scale. And I think you're totally right about it's that over communication piece wherever you can, because as much as like say, something can be very obvious to you as a founder, because obviously you've been on that whole journey. Somebody that's joined the business 6 months ago, you might assume they know kind of the mission of the business, but actually, do they? Or even if they do, and they hear it once, I think it's still about repeating that and, like say, over communicating. And I think a lot of it is about having that kind of North Star really kind of fully present and referred to regularly. And somebody described it to me once as a sign of a healthy business. If you walked into an employee's bedroom at 2 in the morning, and they wake up and go, right, what's the mission of the business, they should be able to say it in a sentence. And it's so on sort of forefront of everybody's mind that irrespective of whatever the tactics and the strategies, especially in a business like yours where you've got three different pillars, I guess, all kind of probably doing different day-to-day duties and the different sort of focuses, but it obviously should all funnel into the shared goal, right? The shared mission of the business. And I think that's the bit that I've seen where companies have really been successful as they grow, is and sort of achieve that alignment. is say over communicating on that North Star piece and just making sure that the real purpose and mission of the business is so well known throughout everybody in the company that kind of everything they're doing on a day-to-day basis, they can kind of see how that contributes to, you know, the greater outcome. And obviously you've got all of these kind of management tools like OKRs and things that obviously Google, you know, employee objectives and key results, which, you know, should in theory do exactly that, kind of align you to the overall business objective in terms of what you're doing day to day. But obviously it's not always as easy to implement. But no, I think it's a really great point that you raise. Well, look, Dedy, really enjoyed the conversation today, and I like to end every podcast with the same question, if you would care to indulge me, which is, what is your favorite piece of advice that you've ever received throughout your career? It could be in a work setting or a personal setting, but just a piece of advice that stuck with you on the journey and that you would care to pass on to your fellow human.
Yeah. I guess like one thing that really kind of sticks with me right now is like, actually it's quite recent. My co-founder, Itamar, who is the CEO, one thing he keeps, like he's been repeating from day one, is that a good strategy is a strategy that you can execute. And I think only like, I mean, I've always like kind of, I got it, but I think recently I've been kind of thinking about it more and more and realizing, and have been realizing how important of an insight that is. I think when everybody thinks about strategy and what should we do and what our differentiators are, like, I think that's the thing that gets the most overlooked. Like in your current setting, your current teams, your current constraints, your current timeline that you have to deliver something, like, are you actually well positioned to execute on what you're trying to do? And in many cases, I feel like people kind of fall in love with an idea or a solution, or like, oh, we'll do this, and many times it just comes to very like kind of like tactical like stuff that like maybe you don't like, people don't like to talk about as much, but like we have a team here that's now really busy doing this. They can't just drop the ball. Like we have another team doing this and they can't just drop the ball. And we can't just now shift them completely. And we want to do this other thing, but we only have this like 1, 2 individuals that can now take it. And we have to do it because we want to launch it in a conference in like a month from now. Okay. So whatever we decide, it has to be something that they can actually do. Like whoever is going to do it can actually do, and it fits their skill set. And there's that like, so it's like, um, yeah, like just like really kind of thinking through that, like when you put together a strategy, either short or longer term. I just gave it a short term example, but there's examples of longer term strategies also. But you got to make sure that it's something you and your team in your setting, in your constraints, can actually execute.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a great piece of advice, and it sort of draws back to, often simpler concepts are easier to execute, aren't they? Something doesn't need to be over complicated to work well. And I think, simple strategies, often easier to execute, are far more powerful, than the most complex strategies out there. So no, I think it's a fantastic way to end. And yeah, I just want to say thank you again for coming on. I think you speak a lot of sense, and it definitely shared a huge amount of value. And I'm really excited to see where Qodo goes on the journey from here. As I think it's a fantastic product, and it seems like you're approaching it in a really sensible and holistic way. So wish you all the success with it. But yeah, do keep in touch. Let us know. Come back in a few months' time. Let us know how you're getting on. It'd be great to have another chat with you and record another episode. But no, you take care, and thanks again for coming on.
Sounds good. Thanks, Guy. It was a pleasure.